One of my favorite things about organizing a festival are the logistics and the layout, and it is truly the magic behind the screen. Let's see, why is it not advancing? There we go. I have a little magic wand, had to do something fun there. So as she said, I am the director of the North Carolina Whirligig Festival, used to be known as the Wilson Whirligig Festival, and we got to a point that we were large enough that we felt like we deserved that extra designation. Our festival is held the first full weekend in November. We avoid Halloween. So this year it will be November 2nd and 3rd, and that will shift with the calendar as the weekends shift. And we used to be the last festival of the season, but more and more areas are starting to realize that is a lovely weather weekend. So we're starting to have a little competition. A lot of people want to know, what the heck is a whirligig? I have never heard of that before. So let me show you. A whirligig is a metal sculpture made of recycled metal. You can see in the lower corner, this is our whirligig park that has majority of the whirligigs are up. A close-up on the right. The cool thing about whirligigs is they spin in the wind, spin 360 degrees, and then parts on them also spin in the wind. And often there's some kinetic energy where the spinning makes some type of action happen. As you can see in that photo on the right, there's some guys that will saw a log and a dog's tail wags. But the biggest thing that people struggle to understand is they are each about the size of a semi-truck. They are not a pinwheel like a child would hold. So imagine a semi-truck spinning in the wheel, not only left and right, but up and down. So these all spin, and they are mathematically erected so that they will not hit each other. We are a typical street festival. We have about 60,000 people over the 2 days. We involve 15 blocks, about 175 vendors, and we are an all-volunteer board. We have no paid staff. We have no designated office under tourism or city or county. This is a completely run all-volunteer board. We are typical in that we have food vendors and bands and a kids zone and arts and all of those type of things that you would see at any type of street festival. Today, what I want to share with you is about that magic of the layout and logistics. We're going to talk about a couple of topics under layout and then a couple about setup. Logistics with setup, breakdown, and working with your vendors. I grew up in a construction family, so I am all about logistics and layout, and that's where my love comes from, is working on construction sites with my family, and I just feel like I build a festival every year. So before we get into those topics, there are what I call the 7 laws of layout and logistics that I wish somebody had told me when I first started. And they are this. 1, it will never be perfect. It can be real, but it won't be perfect. We can try, and we will do the best we can. And each year it will keep improving. But there's always something that's going to be a little off because we're human, because it's a living, breathing creature. Next is, don't fix what ain't broke. If your stage works where it is, don't move it just for fun. If a vendor works right where it is, don't move them just because you want something different. If it's working, leave it alone, especially logistically. Change the bands on the stage, but leave the stage where it is. Keep in mind that when you're planning a festival, things are going to change. It could be a band member gets sick. It could be your clown gets sick. It could be a vendor has to back out. We are currently in our downtown Wilson undergoing construction. So the plan I had last week can't be the plan I have this week because they just told me a whole block can't be accessed and won't be available until December. So I've got to be flexible and change my layout. Every time I post something new about the festival, or here's what's happening, or here's where it's going to go, somebody's going to have a different opinion. And everybody approaches it differently. If I came into your town and laid out your festival, I'd probably choose a different option than you have. You know your festival best. You have to do what you know is best, what works well, and for all the different reasons it works well. Once your festival starts, there's typically 3 things that are going to happen. 1, you're going to forget something. Whether it's the roll of tape that's still laying on your desk or putting up a sign, you're going to get to a point where you realize you forgot something. That's okay. You can react, you can fix it, you have those skills. Next, something is going to go wrong. It could be something minor, it could be something major, but somewhere throughout the weekend, something's going to go astray. But again, you have an action plan that you can make up for that, fix it, or take care of it. And last is midway, you're going to stand and look and go, I could have done that different. And for me, that's where I start my notes for next year. The back of my clipboard that I carry around at all my events, I have 3 blank pages at the back. And on that, I write down those type of notes because when it's all over and I'm tired, I'm not going to remember those little things. And those notes for next year are where I start when I redo it the following year. We can't be perfect, but we can be real. And these are the 7 laws I've learned the hard way. When it comes to layout, location, location, location. Our location dictates our layout. And here are the 2 types of layout that typically happens for a festival. It's either usually wide open, or you have some type of restrictions because you're in a park, a street, a riverfront. There's something that's going to dictate how you set up your festival. I would love in the chat if you could please add what is your festival layout? Is it wide open or is it restricted? And now I have to figure out how to see that. Oh, there we go. Now I can see. All right, I'm seeing how I can answer, but I'm not seeing answers pop up.
I haven't seen anything pop up yet.
Okay, so that's why I'm not seeing it. So
we have one, Miss Karen.
Here we go. Events, but not festivals. Okay, well, that is perfectly under everything I'm saying today applies to events or festivals. So it does not make a difference. For instance, how do I get back to this? Your event or festival, an open space could be a convention center. It could be inside where it's wide open, wall to wall. If you put check-in at one end or food at the other, it is a wide open choice. The same as it would be for a field, is that it is a wide open space. And really, it's going to be your personal preference or the need of the event for it to be determined where things go. This may look wide open, but the parking lot's at that far right corner. So that's where you want your entrance because the parking lot outside may dictate where you want it to be. Next is the restricted. And this is more typical, but not necessarily a bad thing. As we can see at the event on the left, they can go as far north and south as they want, but those buildings prohibit east or west. When it comes to a beach or a riverfront, that water is going to tell you how deep you can go. So you're going to have to stretch it along the space. And in the park you see there in the corner, that they geographically have levels of land. So their city is above them. They've got a park that they're having their music festival. But if you look in that far corner, they're on a shelf and it cuts down again. So this music festival had to be stretched left to right. They can't go any wider. They've got it exactly the width it's going to go. And they had to make some decisions about how they were going to do that layout based on the restrictions. For the Whirligig Festival, we are a pure street festival. We are downtown. We have about 17 blocks that we use. We start at the Vala Simpson Whirligig Park, where the picture where you saw all the gigs are up, and then we stretch out from there. So it is a true street festival. And here you can see an aerial view of the park and then the streets going up left and right into the deep downtown area of Wilson. So we have buildings, we have streets, we have businesses, we have all sorts of things that kind of restrict how we set up. Next would be your balance. Where are the bathrooms? How are you going to lay out, whether it's wide open or restricted? What decisions are you going to make as to where things go? Typically, an event or festival has 2 approaches. One are zones. I'm going to put the kids zone here, the stage here, the food's all going to go over here. Arts and crafts are going to go over here. And some events and festivals love the zone format. And it really depends on the purpose of your zones, what makes it easy. I know one festival that puts their arts and crafts next to the parking so people can carry things back to the car. I know another that puts the food right dead in the middle because they want you to pass through the food going back and forth, no matter what you're doing. So zone is one approach, or you can have a mixed layout. As you see from this map, they have a bathroom in every area. They have vendors in every area. They have food in every area. Now, each area may have a different activity. There's a Ferris wheel up front, or there's a stage in the corner, but they have completely mixed everything else in their layout. For us, the Whirly Gig Festival is a mixed layout. We used our streets, and at the corners and intersections are our food, because that's where the utilities are. And in between the food vendors, nonprofits, arts and crafts, fundraisers, activities, we mix ours completely from corner to corner to corner. The next thing that dictates layout are utilities. Often you have, if you're at an event or an outside area, there's one source of power and lines are run behind your setup. So you're typically going to line them up right down that power grid. For those of us that work in like a city layout or use a street area, we're used to seeing these temporary poles that the electric company will set up for you where everybody can plug in and run their cords. The other things to consider are water. Are your food vendors need flowing water or access to water? And how many generators are okay to be used? We allow generators in certain areas of our festival, but not in any area close to a stage. We don't want to pay $20,000 for 4 bands, and you can't hear a thing because we got generators lined up. And food vendors need to know how far does their hose or their cord have to reach, because some of them have very short and some of them have very long. And then the other thing are the plugs. I did not realize how many different electrical plugs were out there that different vendors plug in. They all don't look like a household plug. So you'll see a little bit later in our information, we actually show a picture of what our plugs look like. And if their plug doesn't match, it's on them to figure it out. They can buy adaptables that plug in and change it. They can even have the end cut off and replaced, but we don't do that. As you can see here is a map that we provide. I sit down with our Wilson Energy, our electrical department, about a month before the festival and say, here's the layout, and here are the extra places I need electricity. That gives them a month to buy utilities, to create temporary poles, to work out the power grid, and to make sure we're not going to overlap so much that they start tripping and people lose power. Then we sit down about a week before and we walk the festival and say, yep, that pole, they tie ribbons, they put little markers so they know what I mean is what they mean, and the pole isn't 10 feet in the wrong direction. I find working with the linemen that are actually going to do the work most helpful. Talking to their boss is nice, but the linemen that are doing the work are who I walk the festival zone with and have actual conversations. Speaking of generators, just in case you didn't know, generators can now have covers and mufflers. So the cover you see on the side is really just to protect it from the weather if you were in the middle of a hurricane like we've all heard about, or a snowstorm, this protect the mechanics of it. But what I'm talking about are the muffler that you see to the right. There are a variety of boxes that vendors can buy that go over their generator that muffle the sound. And this allows us to have more vendors with generators without ruining the atmosphere of our festival and event. Speaking of layout, here is an example of one of the blocks for the Whirly Gig Festival. This is a visual representation. I use a spreadsheet to keep track of some things, but when it comes to the actual layout of the festival, I have a page per block that shows the booth number, the name of the vendor that's going to be in the booth, and then on the outer edges, it shows the stores they are going to be in front of. And that helps me decide what type of vendor I'm going to place in front of them, or do I need to leave a space open? I use a variety of symbols that helps everybody understand where's the power, where's the water, where's the porta-johns. And I try to include some landmarks to help people get their bearings. This makes perfect sense to me, but if I hand it to somebody else, they're going to be switching the paper around, trying to figure out where are they standing. So like the little lighthouse you see at the bottom, we have a parking lot that literally has a lighthouse statue in it, and that helps people get their bearings. Now, a lot of people ask me, how do I make that chart? It is a table in Word. This isn't a complicated software program. I didn't pay $1,000 for it. This is Word. It's a 5-column table, and I've put symbols on it that make sense to me. You may use different symbols. When you go to Word, at the top, there's you can click on the word insert and then choose shapes. And all of those shapes I've used one way or another to create this document. And here's a close-up of it so you can see it a little bit easier, where I have power, water, the porta-johns, the booth number. Like I said, the stores are on the outer edge. So again, I know where these vendors are being set up in front of stores, landmarks. I even have blocked spaces so that I know don't put a vendor here because we want people to pass through and get to the kids stage. And then I also have, the week before, I go back and put green squares to show where it's open. This helps me logistically during the festival if something goes wrong and we need to move a vendor. Somebody got there, they thought they had a 10 by 10 tent, they have a 10 by 12 tent, their neighbors have already set up and it won't fit. What are we gonna do? By having this on my clipboard, I'm able to go, no problem. We're going to walk 4 spaces down and you can set up in this space because it is not claimed. So I can move you. I'm going to get some volunteers to come on over, pick up your tent. We're going to help you get in the right spot. Having this helps me really be able to be flexible and solve problems on the spot. Next thing to consider with your layout are your signs and maps. The one on the right cracks me up. I'm guessing it started with 1 or 2, and by the end of the festival, they added 4 or 5 more. Signs and map are very personal. These will be customized according to your event, what they look like, what they should say, where they should be placed. A few tips to keep in mind. If you're making a printed map or a digital map that's going to show up on a website, please make sure it is an overview and they can see the whole layout in one page. If they have to flip it or turn it or scan down to see the rest of the map, it will lose its impact. So you want to get the entire layout like you see at these two. Now, the difference between these two, the one on the left used little icons because they repeat. They have lockers, so the little key shows where all the lockers are all over the layout. The one on the right chose to use numbers. And even in their numbers, there's some color coding within their numbers. So they easily showed streets and some landmarks to help people find their way. And then they used the numbering system so they would know what's there and where they can find it. The only thing I would say I struggle with both of these maps is nothing's in alphabetical order. People look at legends or look at lists of names and they automatically want it to be alphabetical. So like the one on the right, I would have listed it in alphabetical order and then put the correct number next to it. That way, if I want to find, let's see what's an example on the map. If I wanted to find where the Port-au-Prince VIP lounge is, that needs to be alphabetic versus me scroll and try to find it. The more you can put something in numerical or alphabetical order, the easier it will be for folks to actually use your map. And always keep in mind, in today's society, that map has to translate mobile. People are going to pull it up on their phone. And if it's so small, it can't be used, or it doesn't have the ability to be enlarged, then it's going to be trouble. So please make sure your map, whether it's interactive or a PDF, that it is enlargeable so people can zoom in. Now, there are a lot of ways you can have your map in your festival. You can have a kiosk, you can have signs. The one on the left is the one that we use with the Whirligig Festival. We find it works best, and we call it "You Are Here." This is kind of a mall kiosk where you would go to a mall and say, all right, I want to find Hallmark. And you look for it alphabetically, and it tells you where on the map it is. What we overlay on our map are the vendor numbers, the 200 range, the 300 range, the 400 range, and then we list them out so people can say, hey, if I want to find that great funnel cake I remember, or that art that I went to last year, it gives them a list and a number, and then they can find it in that block. And then the brochure rack at the bottom is where we have printed schedules. I will say, as much as people like it, and the first year we did it was about 7 years ago, I wondered if people were actually going to use it, and they did. They stopped. We have them at every intersection. They stop, they look, they point, and then on the back side is in a large map. It's even bigger on the reverse side. And as wonderful as it is, and as many things as we do, we have found our number one best way to get out schedules and maps are our volunteers. We have a core of 20 volunteers every hour on the hour that walk through the festival in brightly colored t-shirts and literally hand them out to people. Even in today's age where a lot of people use their phone, when you hand them a printed schedule or layout, they're thrilled. Great, I don't have to pull out the phone. I don't have to balance the phone with everything else in my hands. I've got it right here. So if you don't have a core of volunteers that are doing that, I certainly advise it. Walking throughout the festival or throughout the event, handing out that basic information we have found to be the most successful way to share this information. So take a look at this street. Comes to signs. Do you see any? There's one blue one on that lamppost that's really saying it's a bus stop. There's no bus today. When you decide where to put your signs, you have to make sure they're going to be visible. We set them out before anybody gets there, but once it fills, they're gone. So you have to make sure your signage is at a height or an area that is very visible. This lady on the left made a great pink sign showing where everything is, and one will be seen once the streets fill. Feather flags are a great way to mark zones. Lamp posts are a great way to mark areas, or at least get your logo up there. But signage has to be up high where people can see it. When you look at this, if I'm hungry and I'm headed down this street, where do I see food? One, chicken teriyaki. And that's where I'm going to head because I feel confident my effort to head that direction is where I'm going. The other tents, I can't tell from here what they are or what they're doing. So height with your signs are important. And that's also true at your entrances where you want to welcome people. You want to make sure you have height to welcome them. And I love these welcome signs. The one on the left is a handmade one. This isn't some big expensive thing. It's an arch they created with some wooden letters, and I just love it. And the one on the right, the North Carolina Bear Festival, Tom knows how to do it right. He created a giant inflatable that's a tunnel that you walk through. He even put up barricades to make sure you don't go around it. And he uses that as a way to count the number of people that come. It's a free festival. So if you don't have a way to count people, how do you know how many came? And so he created this, and it's an easy setup. It blows up and it folds back in a box, and it doesn't take a whole army to build it. No matter what type of signage you use, you're going to figure out what works best for your event, whether it's A-frames or arrows on the ground. Yard signs work great if you have grass. I'm a street festival. I don't have any grass to stick them in. So you have to figure out logistically what works best for you and what will be seen. And don't forget your exit signs. Exit signs need, again, to be high where people can see them. The three girls in the top with the umbrella hats, that exit is far, far away, but you can see it clearly from where we're standing. And you can also use your exit to invite them back. Go ahead and put up next year's date. Let them know as they walk out, they're going to put that phone up and take a picture and go ahead and put it on their calendar if they had a great time. Word to the wise, make sure whoever's putting up your signs know where to put them and where they should point. As you can see in the bottom right, they were doing good, but somewhere in the middle, they got lost. And what's going to happen is those cars are exiting, they're going to stop because exit is left and right. And now they have to make a decision. When we want our folks to exit our event, we don't want them thinking. We want them just to flow and exit. And this is going to cause a traffic jam. All right, now let's switch gears to logistics. And I am going to stop talking at the end to take questions, but I wanted to make sure we got through all the information. When it comes to your logistics, setup, breakdown, and vendors, your biggest structures are typically stage, tables, chairs, tents. So that's where you have to start. And you have to create a timeline for yourself. What do I need to get in place a year ahead of time? For me, I have to reserve our stages 1 year in advance or it may not happen. So Happy New Year means to me, reserve stages, reserve tents, reserve porta-johns. 1 year away from my festival is when I make those reservations. And then there'll be different things, 9 months out, 6 months out. My water department does not want to see my map until 2 weeks before the festival. They don't care. Hydrants don't move. They just want to know which ones they're tapping and which ones they're not. So I don't bother them in February. I call them in October. Others want to know ahead of time. If I waited 2 weeks before to reserve tents, I wouldn't have any tents. So you have to create that setup timeline of when do people need to be notified. The next thing I can advise is working from the middle out. The last thing you want to do is get something up and in place, and now I can't get the next thing around it. So you have to start at the middle of your event and work your way out to the perimeters. And we've all made this mistake. We've all done it in our homes, putting together new furniture, trying to get something to squeeze by, or taking it back apart to get it in and then setting it back up. So try to keep in mind to do the interior first and work your way out to the perimeter. The other things that need to be set up front are your structures, those things that are not flexible, your stage, your sound, fencing, anything like that. And keep in mind, your stage and sound take a lot longer than you ever think it's going to be. Our festival starts on Saturday morning at 10. Our stage and sound start setting up Friday at 3. And they work overnight to make sure it's in place. They take a long time and we want them to have the time they need. We don't want to rush them. So think about those things that are going to be in place the entire time and get those set up first. Then make your way to the perimeter. Put up the fun decorations, put up the temporary things. Maybe your vendor check-in is only set up for a couple of hours and then it disappears. Think about your porta-johns. Ooh, I made that mistake once. Put my porta-johns all the way in the middle, then the truck couldn't get to them to service them. So we lost use of them on a full day because the truck couldn't get in to empty and treat them. So you have to think about what goes first, what goes last, start from the middle and work your way out. Breakdown happens much faster than setup. People are shoving stuff in their trucks. Tents are coming down like lightning. It happens so fast. A vendor will take 2 hours to set up their booth and 20 minutes to break it down because they don't care once it's in the truck. They just want to get it and get out. So one of the things that we do during breakdown is we clear every path we can. We move stuff out of the way. Those setup volunteers come back and move stuff to sidewalks so that we can open every exit possible. Our vendors enter our festival zone in one spot, the gold star. Everybody comes in, they make their way around the street, and we are very careful with one-way traffic so we don't have anybody that bumps into each other. But when the festival's over on Sunday at 5 o'clock, my volunteers go open all those barricades. So they still come in one way, but when they're done, we have 5 different ways for them to get out. And if we didn't do that, we'd be there till Monday. So as many exits as you can open to let people out, the better. And that's the same in convention centers, event halls. They all have back doors and fire codes and exits that they can open all those doors. Let everybody go out whatever direction they can for your breakdown. Once you've broken down, it's not over. Now you need to clean up. Doesn't matter again, if you're in a convention hall or a hotel or wherever, there's cleanup that will need to be done. You want to leave that event center as beautiful as it was when you walked in, so they'll let you come back the next year. I'm a confetti girl. I love glitter, and I used way too much glitter one year, and that event center never let us come back because of the glitter that lived on for years and years. So we have a crew that comes in and does the street cleaning and picking up of garbage. And then our street department comes in at 9 o'clock that night and walks, and they drive this little vehicle and walk block by block, making sure that the street, by midnight on Sunday night, you'd never know there was a festival in our downtown. And our volunteers are crucial. As many volunteers as you have at the beginning help set up, you need just the same, if not more, to help break down at the end. And we tend to cut ourselves short with that breakdown. We do the harder work. We'll stay the extra hour. Volunteers need volunteer hours. They don't care if it's at the start or the end. Make sure you have a solid crew. One thing that we have implemented is a next day inspection. Because when we are finally broken down, it is pitch dark and we're all operating with flashlights, you miss things. So we have a small crew that walks through the next morning and just looks for things that probably got left behind. We have a lost and found office. We hold on to the items for 1 week, and then we turn them over to the police department if they're valuable items. But we have a small crew that rolls with garbage cans and buggies, picking things up, discovering things, putting things in a pile. We have one guy that drives a truck where we just pile things in a truck and then sort it out back at our office. And this has become very important. One year we had a vendor, one of the stores' front window got broken. A vendor didn't mean to, but they picked up something, a long pole, and smashed it and cracked their window. And we saw it before they opened their business the next morning. And that was crucial in our community relations to be able to say to them ahead of time, look, we noticed something. Was this already broken, or did something happen over the weekend? Well, we have a plan to fix it. And that vendor and us went in dibs and helped pay to fix the window. So that next day inspection is very important. Vendors, they are a different creature. They love what they do. They have a passion for what they do, whether it's art or schnitzels. They love what they do, and nobody knows more about it than they do. So what they need the most is communication, communication, and communication. And in our communication with them, we give them their parking pass, what gate they're going to enter, what is the check-in process, what's the overall schedule, when is breakdown, and how they're going to exit. They get all of that information at the beginning. For us, we do a street side check-in. They don't even get out of their cars. They pull up in their cars. They show us their parking pass. We check them in. We send them on their way. We don't have a tent. They don't get out. But at an event that you run, then you may have that at the beginning where you have a table where they show up and they check in. But that shouldn't be the first time they get information. And we have to make sure our volunteers that are greeting them are the friendliest, happiest people you could ever have. They've had a very stressful day getting to you, hauling all their stuff, getting everything in the vehicle. Now they've got to get it out. So they are very stressed. So the most happiest volunteers you can have at that check-in area, the better your day is going to go. For us, we use lots of emails to communicate. I do not text with vendors or people who are participating because I need that history of communication, and texts are going to get lost in everything else. 1 month before the event, we send out an approved packet that contains generic information. What's everything everybody needs to know. Doesn't matter if you're arts and crafts or a food vendor, doesn't matter. You need to know hotels and restaurants and schedules and load-in priorities. That's the type of stuff everybody needs to know 1 month ahead of time. Then we have a secondary packet called the placement packet we send out the weekend before. This gives us a chance to give any updates, and it gives them their booth number and a map and parking so they know exactly where they're going to be. And I'll be honest, I do it a weekend before because I don't want a month of people begging to move their spot. Once I've put my festival together or laid out my event, there isn't really a lot of wiggle room to flip things around. And I don't want to listen to them asking for a month of, could you switch me to here, to here, to here, to here? We do it the weekend before because this is where we're going with. There's a company called EventMe that we use for all of our vendor registrations. And one of the things that I love about them is their emails are per person. So if I have a vendor that I'm communicating with about their funnel cakes and what's going to go and the inspection that's needed, I have a history with that all right there. It's not mixed in with all of my emails. It is per vendor. And that has helped us so much that I can open their application and see our communications back and forth. It's all email, but it's still all together versus me sorting when did I talk to them and how is it, and mixed in with everything else that comes into my Gmail. Here's an example of what our part 1 packet looks like. It's a welcome. It shows those outlets I talked about. It talks about our festival booth reminders. We try to keep this to 1 page. And the reason we include our festival booth reminders is because they could have applied for a festival in July and they're coming in November. How many other festivals have they participated in between then? So we give a highlight of here are the rules we're going to expect you to follow. And we try to keep it to 1 page because if it gets beyond that, they're not going to read it. But here it is, bold print, 1 by 1. This is what we're going to expect you to do. Our part 2 gets a little more detailed. This is where we add in our parking pass. We tell them about stopping at vendor check-in. How do they find their numbers? And where do they know their space lines are? We made the mistake in our downtown area one year to actually draw lines so that they were between the lines. And for the 3 months after the festival, people thought there was free parking all over downtown. So we learned our lesson there that we draw dots now and not lines. But just simple areas like parking shuttles and passes and where all those logistics that they need to know, that they don't need to know a month ahead of time, they need to know the week before. We also include, this is our vendor assignment list. So we send them the map so they can see where they're going to be. And we send them a list of the entire vendor list so they know who else is coming. On the flip side of festivals is a vendor community. And they want to know if their friends are going to be there. So this also gives us a chance to double check. Not only am I telling you where your booth is, but we have you down for a double with electricity, no water, and you're a new vendor. And if we've made a mistake anywhere in here, we have a chance to react and fix it. So that's why we include that and give them their numbers. And they can easily say, oh, I don't know exactly where I am, but I know I'm in the 300 block and it's over here. So they'll know when they enter the gate that they have to go all the way around before they're going to find their spot. One of the best decisions we ever made was a few years ago was to add our traffic guides. At every intersection, we have somebody standing in a reflective vest and a sign that spins where they can point traffic in the right direction. Like I said, for us, we have a one-way flow. So this helps people when they get to that intersection to know, do I go straight? Do I go left? Do I go right? And that sign, they don't have to stop. They don't have to talk. They've got a sign that's going to point them in the right direction. These 6 people have become crucial to our vendor load in and load out. And we get these volunteers from our fire academy and our police academy. They are the type of folks we can trust with very little training and can handle emergency situations. If something gets turned around, they can handle it. So it's just 6 people. We have 6 on Friday night and 6 on Saturday morning, and those 12 people are a blessing. I've shared a lot of information, but I'm no expert. I've just learned by the School of Hard Knocks. There are a lot of things out there that you can learn from. There's a lot of things online where you can get tips. You just have to make sure that you're applying it to your event and to your festival in a way that makes sense for you. The exact way somebody else would do it may not work in your setup, but it's good to read them. It's good to learn. It's good to think about things in a slightly different way. One of the best places that I learn is ShowFest. The North Carolina Festival and Events Association is a lifesaver. They're my peeps. When I go to ShowFest, I'm with 250 other event planners, and nobody gets it like we do. We can finish each other's sentences. We can be honest with each other. We can commiserate and celebrate. And ShowFest is that conference I go to that recharges my battery. I come back every year happier because, all right, I'm going to do it again. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to do it again. And the tools that I can use to do it. The exhibit hall is where I learn about new entertainment, new contracts, new gadgets, new things. And then the educational sessions, I always come back with a lot of notes of things that I can apply and use. And the awards. There's a great awards program where you can submit different parts of your event or festival to be recognized. And when you get to come home with a trophy, it feels great. So we talked about logistics, we talked about layout. What about us? As event planners, we need to take care of ourselves. And this typically is at the bottom of our list. The night before your event, go to bed early because you're not going to sleep. Your brain's going to be spinning with details. So give yourself a head start. For me, I am always the first one there and the last one to leave. And this, for me, allows me to breathe, to get there with the empty streets at 5 a.m. and breathe. It's going to be a great day. And then the last one to leave, I have a peace of mind so that I know everything is taken care of. Be careful what you eat. You got to eat from the people you trust. Even if it's a one-day event or a banquet, you got to make sure that you're still going to be able to be in action. You don't want to spend the second half of your day in the porta-johns. So make sure that you eat and eat what you trust. Whenever you can give yourself a chance, sit down. Your feet are tired. Your back is hurting. Your legs have been going. Sit down, even if it's for 5 minutes. Sit down. Make sure you carve out one fun thing for yourself and buy one fun thing. Whether it's listening to the band for just one song or bringing yourself a favorite smoothie to get you through the afternoon, make sure to do a little bit of self-care. And as the event director, ask for help and delegate. There are certainly things you could take care of, but should your attention be elsewhere and get somebody else to take care of the problem, the issue, the cleanup, call for help and delegate to others. I'm going to end here on those 7 laws, just a refresher screen. My name is Teresa Mathis. I work for the city of Wilson during the day, and I whirl on weekends planning the North Carolina Whirligig Festival. Love to have you reach out to me, and if you have any questions, I'll open the floor.